The topic I chose to analyze is the language barrier in the professional wrestling industry. Professional wrestling is an entertainment industry that dates back to the 1860s and has evolved over time. Its target audience has been primarily American, especially in the 1970s and 80s. Vince McMahon's World Wrestling Entertainment promotion has become a global phenomenon, reaching audience numbers never before seen in the business. Since its inception, no wrestling company has been able to kill the WWE, but there have been a lot of competitors. Companies such as the NWA, WCW, Impact Wrestling, and most recently AEW have tried to claim the throne of wrestling from the global powerhouse, but perhaps the biggest dent has been made in Japan. The Japanese wrestling scene has been well received for decades with its wrestling style that is a lot more hard hitting than WWE's accepted style. Fans all over enjoy the styles of all backgrounds, and wrestling maintains a global presence because of it. However, the more people wrestling reaches, the more problems arise. Over time, mainly thanks to WWE, wrestling has reached its most broad audience ever, broadcasting its television shows in more than 150 countries and 30 languages around the world. This wide audience has created the need for international representation and relatability in the form of new characters in the wrestling world. One major problem that I find is that wrestling is locked from within when it comes to language. In terms of actual languages, talent from non English speaking countries are often cast aside because of their lack of English speech in an effort to appeal to the primarily American audience. For example, the woman in the shown photo, Asuka, debuted on the main WWE roster in 2017, had a huge on screen presence with an undefeated streak, but was immediately tossed aside by mid 2018 when writers discovered she was incapable of delivering well put English promos or speeches. Asuka needed to create different ways of getting the story across. Now, she almost always abandons her broken English and screams at her opponent in Japanese. This gets fans intrigued and they want to see what happens next, continuing the appeal of the storyline as well as Asuka's character going forward. Her most recent stories involving her championship reigns have been very well received by fans as they feel they have played a role in these developments. Another example of this comes from Andrade, a lucha libre prodigy from Mexico. He was prominently featured in matches, but he was never given a fair attempt on the microphone, as he was given a manager instead. As of this presentation, he is not featured on television in any capacity. There is also a hidden language in wrestling that those outside the business do not understand. While the product on the screen is perceived to be real, those behind the scenes use lingo to keep secrets under wraps. A major example is a mark. In common language, a mark is a small area of a different color than its surroundings. In wrestling jargon, a mark is someone susceptible to kayfabe, or someone who is not clued in to professional wrestling's scripted quality. While similar on face level in that both definitions point out a specific portion among its surroundings, they are very different in practice. One term that is vastly different in wrestling from its common counterpart is a shoot. Commonly, a shoot is the event where a photographer takes photos of a person or a location. In wrestling, a shoot is defined as an unscripted act that breaks the illusion presented by the wrestling product. Wrestling fans have become accustomed to using this language, and it locks those who are unaware out of the loop. This causes them to understand less of the product, and that'll draw them away from wrestling. When it comes to the future of the language barrier in wrestling, there is not a simple solution. This is a multi step, multi year process that begins with fan outcry. The biggest leaps in diversifying language representation in wrestling have come from fans backing those stars on social media and chanting their names at events. Going back to the situation with Asuka, her recent rise to the top of the card would have never taken place if it were not for the fans wanting her to get more screen time, as her talents were wasted otherwise. In an article from Alverman, Huddleston quotes his brother, saying wrestling is like a soap opera. If the story is interesting, people will want to continue watching. And what better way to get fans watching than giving them exactly what they want? Looking at the hidden language of wrestling, this is an issue that is also resolved by fans. It is my personal belief that the internet is great for wrestling, but it is also the reason people know its secrets. The best way to address these terms and phrases is to ignore them. Treat the wrestling product like a sport. Go in blindly, assuming the product is real, because at its core, wrestling is real. It is predetermined, but it is just as unpredictable as any sport. If fans avoid using these terms, such as work, shoot, and mark, more people will be invited into the wrestling world. More people will be captivated by the product, and an even broader audience will begin to appreciate wrestling for what it is, a storytelling medium.